These are 5 security-focused rules that you may want to add to Cursor or to Claude Code as skills, as something that is forward-thinking, as something that you may not need right now, but in the future you may thank yourself for doing so. I recently had a conversation with an early-stage startup founder. They do AI for the banking industry. And a lot of the conversation was about architecture and also security and what can they do to actually comply with all the bank's requirements. At the end of the meeting, I promised to send him a list of things that maybe they should do earlier on to save them some headaches later. And later, I was writing this list. I had a list of a few items that of things they should start doing. But then I thought, you know what, for this specific client, for this founder, I think this may be a little too early to think of it. But then another thought came to me. Maybe we could summarize these things. Maybe we can take these items and actually put them as Cursor rules. So in their case, because they're working with Cursor, this would be a passive way of actually adhering to a few rules, to a few guidelines, and do things in the background without having to actually focus on them and sway their attention from actually selling and getting traction. And because they're so early, I don't think that this should be their focus. But then again, why not start with a good baseline for security? And in this video, I will show you exactly what these rules are and why you may want to actually implement them. And especially if you're going to work with bigger clients, you may want to add these rules. And the reason is, at one point, you will reach your customers. They don't have to be the banking industry. Pretty much all bigger clients, enterprise clients, mid-sized clients and above will have these huge security requirement documents, these spreadsheets of doom that they will send you, and they will have all sorts of items that you may not necessarily understand or know what they mean, but in general, most of them will have a few things that will pretty much be everywhere, right? These are decent requirements that everyone should be doing. They will be focused on the actual data and trying to prevent leakage of sensitive data. And they also want to see that you'll have governance and that you have visibility into your application. And these rules may not be necessarily viable for your first iteration of a product, but trust me, they will save you a lot of headaches later down the road. You'll thank yourself. You'll thank me, hopefully. And before I move on to the rules, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this content. The first rule I'm going to talk about is actually protecting ourselves against adding vulnerable packages to our system. Now, this is a well-known issue with working with AI agents for coding. They will introduce sometimes obscure or vulnerable NPM packages or whatever package manager you are using, and that could be a supply chain issue. Now, all of the security questionnaires, all of the security requirements you will receive from clients will put some emphasis on securing your packages, keeping them up to date. And if you do it later in the process, that could mean a lot of headaches. Sometimes you add a package, you rely on it, and then refactoring everything or trying to patch everything could be a huge mess. So the first thing we can do is actually add some security scanning. Ask our coding agent to actually perform a process, actually look at the packages before it commits them, before it actually adds them to the code base. And with NPM, we can add a rule that says whenever you are installing a new package, okay, I want to introduce a new package. What we'll try to do, once you add it to package.json, install it, but with package lock only, just to see the package lock. And then we'll use an open source tool. In this case, it's Trivi. You can use other tools if you're paying for other tools. They may have MCPs, they may have other things, but we can add Trivi scanner for this thing and ask it to actually find either a new version of this package. And again, a lot of the times the coding agents will be a bit dated in their data, so they will add a package that may be vulnerable and not the latest one. So this will tell it, okay, you should try to figure out if there's a newer version of this, or even maybe try to find out a different package altogether. So we're adding the rule. We're saying install the package in a package lock only, so don't actually download it, and then scan it, then review the results and see if there are any problems. And if there are, then maybe you should try to fix it. So I'll show you a quick example. And now this is under Cursor rules. If you're using Claude Code, you can use skills. You can put it all in one skill. If you think it's a security skill, you can merge all of them together or create separate skills like this. But this example is, of course, with Cursor. And let's say that I want to add this log-dash npm package. Now, this is a package that has a vulnerability, and I know that it has it. And let's see what happens when I try to install it through the agents that I specifically ask for this package. And you can see that it checks the current package against the Cursor rules. Here you can see that it also checked the licenses, and that will be our next rule. But for now, let's focus on this on the security scanning rule. It's asking to run the security scanner. It actually detects that it has a few issues, and it will try to remediate it. Okay, it found a new package. It's because it's a new package that it's suggesting, it will retest it. And we're good. Okay, so that was the first rule. And if you looked closely, you might have seen that we are actually have another rule that is related to open source licenses. And that is the next one. So while it's working, let's see what goes in here. So one of the requirements you may receive from your vendors, but this is also something that pretty much all companies should be doing with their code base. And that is auditing their open source license usage. You add different packages. Different packages might have different licenses. Some licenses are good for your project, some are not, depending on how you distribute your software and other things. And keeping a list of open source licenses is very important. And it's not something your developers will actually keep in mind in most cases. They'll just run this AI coding agent and will use whatever it finds. But later down the road, you may need that. We can now just add a simple rule that says, please check the licenses for these NPM packages that you're adding, and also which licenses to prefer when installing a new package. This is very important. And one of the things that it allows us is to later run a separate process on this file, on this open source licenses txt file that we may create. Now, with everything, Cursor rules, and also in Claude Code, you have the skills. They will not always be called on, but that's fine. And it's much better than not having anything in place. So next thing, audit logging is important. It's something that you will be asked to do. And it basically means you want to know who did what when, especially when it comes to privileged usage, or maybe if you're making changes to a policy in the UI, maybe you're adding users, removing users, all these things that you do in your app that are related to privileged usage, or making changes to systems, updating policies, changing architectures, whatever your tool does. Whenever there's something that you need to take note of, you need to keep an audit log. So later you can come on and investigate. If there's a forensic team trying to figure out what happened, you want to have these logs. You also want to have them somewhere secure. But in this specific rule, we just want to say that whenever you're making changes, so maybe it's logging logouts, maybe it's adding users, removing users, viewing restricted documents, if you are required to actually monitor whenever someone accesses sensitive data, that goes in there as well to the audit log. We want to have that in place. So I created a rule that tells Cursor, to the AI coding agent, that whenever they work on new code, or not so new code, that is related to one of these items, so restricted data access, privileged operation, it should actually create an audit log, a trail of what happened. And one other thing that is super important, and it's very good to have from the get-go, is to actually adhere to one single format. Otherwise, you will have different formats and it will be basically unusable. When you want to actually see it later, if there's an incident, it will make your life a huge mess. So you want to have a uniform format and you want to have these logs. And again, this is something that your developers may not want to think about when they're adding new code. You just want to run forward. You want to keep momentum. But just by having this rule, again, you will be saving yourself a lot of work later when you have a huge code base and you will find this requirement by a client and you will be scrambling to actually fix it and try to implement it. This way you have it from the get-go. The next rule is all about encryption, and this is a fairly simple one. In most cases, the AI agents will do this by default, but this is where we say that we want to pretty much encrypt everything in transit and at rest. So we want to ensure that we're not using HTTP between different services that we have. We want to ensure that if we keep data, it will be secure. We want to put encryption keys. We want to keep it as safe as possible. This is very relevant when you launch new services. If you are working with Kubernetes, if you're working with Terraform, guidelines will basically try to enforce encryption on everything. And this is a good thing because all security questionnaires, all requirements from the clients will say that all sensitive data should be encrypted. Now, it may not be the use case for some of the things, but as a default, this is good. I would rather have everything encrypted and then explicitly try to unencrypt something or change how it works to make it unencrypted if I have to. But as long as I know that the baseline is there, I want to keep it there. Basically, we can also give it our guidelines on key management, key length, rotation, everything that we want as a security organization. You may not have one now, you're too small, but if you take the cap of the security officer or the security team, you want to have that. And that's like having a security team, right? You have these rules. Think of them as small agents that take care of your security for you when working with AI agents or not. And also, by the way, you can use these rules later, maybe in your CI/CD. You can invoke some of them specifically in a later stage to make sure that you're complying with everything. And the last rule is a little forced here. I added it because I wanted to have 5 rules. First is that there's something that you should be doing. This is something that you will see in the AWS well-architected framework, and you will see in a lot of questionnaires, is you want to have data classification. You want to know the types of data that you are holding. So that could be PII, that could be other forms of data. Maybe it's internal data for your company, maybe it's your client's data, and you need to actually classify it. So you classify it whether it's internal, confidential, PII, PCI. You want to know the impact of it on your system. And it's really hard to do, and especially for engineers that may not be even aware that we need to do that data classification. And we add things through the code, we add more information, we save it in different places. So this could be on the database, this can be and send out external events, and we want to know where these are. And these guidelines, having a data classification rule, will actually help you, and it will say, please comment this. We want to make it easier for us later to see that data, to get this data. We want to raise red flags in case if the engineer asks for something that we shouldn't have. And if we send it somewhere to a third party, maybe we want to raise a flag here. And these rules will actually help us think ahead and classify this data. So these were our 5 rules for security for AI coding agents. And it's a little thought experiment. This is something that could evolve, but think of it as creating your own security engineer, your own security consultant within the code from a very early stage. And that means that it frees you up to actually accomplish more things, gain more traction with your product on the early stage. And if you're a more mature company, this is a way for the security team to introduce rules that will help you help them by complying with security related things without actually having to keep that in mind all the time. I will post a link to these files for these rules in the video description. But you can ask the AI agents themselves to create these rules. You can do some research and add them. Just experiment with them. What you do need to keep in mind is they should be fairly short. You don't want to include too much context and inflate your tokens. So these could be rules. These could be something that you mention at different times in your chat just so you can invoke them specifically. But I think it's still a good idea to have at least some of them. And this wraps up the video. I will see you in the next one. And don't forget, please subscribe to the channel, like this video if you actually implemented some of the rules, and also leave a comment if you added a rule of your own that you think is interesting. And again, I'll see you in the next one.